Hi everyone, I'm Dan Kaplan, Executive Editor of SC Magazine, and thank you for coming in focus with us. Today we are joined by Marc Kaplan, the Senior Director of Security Architects at F5, and Jeremiah Grossman, who's the founder and CTO of WhiteHat Security. Gentlemen, thank you for being with us.
Good morning. Morning.
We are talking about web application security today. It's a very common vector of attack. The breaches are continuing at lightning speed. Talk to me a little bit about the state of application security. Marc, I want to start with you.
Good. You know, our customers are seeing it grow tremendously, as you said. We are seeing it across the board that the customers being hit by it, also the customers concerned about it, have grown tremendously. The attacks are becoming more complicated, but unfortunately the challenge we have in organizations is that the skill set of the folks that need to manage those attacks has not increased, creating a complexity that they just can't handle on a daily basis.
Yeah, and Jeremiah, no company is off limits for this sort of attack.
Bad guys don't care about our laws. They don't care what compliance obligations. They're in it for the money. They're interested in the nation-state power. The taller our firewalls get, the more sophisticated our antivirus. Doesn't really matter to these guys. Port 80 is open, and they're going to reap and pillage what they can.
When we're talking about taking advantage of vulnerable applications, is it on a targeted basis, or are we seeing more of the mass stuff? The attackers are kind of spreading their wares across the board.
The answer is yes. Web security, or this insecurity of websites, has been a long-standing problem for at least the last decade. It was largely ignored for from 2000 to 2005, and the bad guys took notice. The network got sufficiently secure and pushed the bad guys to the web application layer. What happened first is the attack profiles were mass distribution. Everybody's getting attacked, but now it's become increasingly more targeted. So now it's both. You do have the untargeted adversaries, but now you also have the guys that know who your names are and know what they want.
And I think, just to add to that, I think what's changed dramatically is the tools are becoming publicly available to anyone. They've made them so much simpler than they were years ago. To your point, it's anyone now can launch attacks. And unfortunately, the common players are now not always the bad guys. It's the guys that feel like they're just helping out, the hacktivists that feel like, you know, some company has done something against us, and we're going to help out by bringing them down. So to your point, anyone's a target as long as they're publicly visible.
And when we're talking about the purveyors behind these threats, you know, typically the hacker class is broken down to the hacktivists, right. The common criminals are after financial information, and then the more nation state. But the application layer is still the preferred way for all of those different classes of attackers to get in?
Absolutely, to some degree, but we're still seeing the old styles of getting into organizations hasn't changed. I mean, we've talked about, you know, folks getting through the standard dial-up has changed dramatically, but still wireless networks are a target, and the landscape has stayed the same, but now they've taken it up the layer, the stack, and that's where it creates a lot of complexity, especially when folks are used to the old world style of just stateful firewalls, and they thought they were protected.
So we got the hacktivists. They go by names like Anonymous and LulzSec, and they can cause significant damage, but they're not the ones that really concern me at the end of the day. They will cause damage and millions of dollars of loss, but it's the bad guys who compromise your systems, who don't laugh at you, who don't tell you, the ones that are far more disconcerting, who are quite content to rob us blind for many more millions of dollars in all our intellectual property. Those are the guys that we have to be really concerned about.
Where within an organization is a priority level when it comes to web security? It's written a bit now into some compliance requirements such as PCI, but briefly mentioned. But clearly this is the major source of attack. So Jeremiah, I mean, is it kind of going up the, is it kind of becoming more prominent on the radar?
So when you ask the question, where is web security in the priority scale, the question has to be placed in context of, are you pre-breach or post-breach? If you're pre-breach, you're spending on firewalls and antivirus. If you're post-breach, you go, why didn't those protect me exactly? And then all of a sudden your world gets really sobering really quickly.
And most companies probably are post-breach.
Whether they know it or not, probably there's more so, which is why you're seeing increased emphasis on web security. You look at it statistically, most of the major breaches out there that are happening every day or if every week are web security related. So we're going to have to figure out this problem here. The answers are out there, but organizations have to stop treating their solutions as sacred cows and go, this is a web security problem here. We have something wrong with our software. And no amount of protecting the networks is going to help us, independent of what compliance says.
Yeah. So, Mark, does that mean it comes down to a risk management issue?
It absolutely does. It absolutely does. And unfortunately, in the past, they haven't weighed the financial aspects of that risk. To Jeremiah's point, post-penetration is very expensive, when solutions from WhiteHat and F5 are, in comparison, extremely cost-effective, and also create an environment that your organization can focus on actually the business rather than the fact that you're cleaning up a mess. Once they get into your network, you're pretty much done.
Who is like the burden really on to fix some of these web problems that we have?
There's always a question of who's culpable and who's going to take responsibility. And whoever takes responsibility, there's real consequences for that. If you make the ISP responsible, then they're only going to want to inspect your traffic to a very fine degree. And the same thing when you have government control over that capacity. But when you really look at it, if you're looking for, if nation states are attacking you and the government is ill-equipped to protect you, you're going to have to protect yourself, and that's going to be extremely difficult. You have professional people out there looking at your equipment, looking at your assets, and wanting to attack you 24/7. That must be the focus. That must be the operating environment in which you conduct your security.
Yeah.
I think just adding to that, the point Jeremiah is making is that we wake up in the morning, our customers wake up in the morning, and they have multiple jobs. Their job is to manage an infrastructure, their job is to manage servers, and their job is to do security. The folks that Jeremiah is talking about are folks that all they do when they wake up is try to get into your network. That's all they're doing. They have one goal and one goal only, and that's the challenge we have as an organization, is that we're not dedicated to security, and we have to be. And companies like WhiteHat and companies like F5 help augment it, but someone has to take the responsibility and say, we own that problem, we have to invest in it.
Mm-hmm. Now, Mark, I hear so much now about assuming compromise and sort of focusing your efforts on responding to the attack once it's happened. But you and Jeremiah probably would believe that there's still some defense, some more perimeter-focused stuff that can be done to thwart these attackers before they get in. Would you say that's fair?
I think it's extremely fair. We were just meeting with a senator just 2 weeks ago, and they were talking about utilities and how utilities there's a bill on the table to protect, to have the government help figure out what's the minimum that utilities should do to protect themselves. And honestly, I've seen some scary things in industry of how they approach it, and defense is always the first step you need to take, and at least the least investment usually.
Yeah, Jeremiah, you're not ready to end the fight just yet.
No, I don't like losing, but it is pragmatic. You'll see there's two types of victims in the world. You can be the victim of opportunity, you can be the victim of choice. So if you're targeted, that's a whole other matter. But a lot of retailers out there, they're not necessarily targeted. You're part of a class of potential victims. So you don't necessarily have to have perfect security. What you have to do is have better than average. I like to use the analogy, you don't have to, you and your friend are in the woods hiking, right? You don't have to outrun the bear, you have to outrun
him.
Yeah. And so a lot of that is out there. So it's, there's no end to the race, but you have to improve your security. The bad guys shouldn't be able to break into your system in 5 minutes. Make them take an hour, and they might actually move on.
Let's conclude with, are we getting any better? Both of you guys have been in this space for quite some time right now. Is there any improvement? And looking forward, I mean, what can you expect kind of down the road? Is a lot of this stuff going to continue?
Well, our sales reflect that we're getting better. The industry is recognizing that they need to invest ahead of the curve rather than what they were doing probably 4 or 5 years ago, which is essentially waiting for it to happen and then responding. So yeah, absolutely.
Given what we do for a living, we happen to know who's vulnerable to what and how often, so we have to get a really good view of the security landscape out there, if we will. We know who's vulnerable to cross-site scripting, SQL injection, and how long.
And it's a lot of folks.
And it's a lot of vulnerabilities out there. And the more I look at the data, our data, it is a biased sampling of those that care, this is how they perform, and anybody outside of that bubble is going to do substantially worse. And I'm noticing a very clear trend on things improving over time. We're getting less vulnerabilities year over year, our time to fix windows are improving, and our remediation rates are getting more comprehensive. The breaches will continue because we cannot ever forget that the bad guys just need one vulnerability. And that one vulnerability will always be there, but let's make it that much harder to find.
Yeah. Well, the attackers are going to keep going as long as it's making them money, so they're going to find ways, and the defenders are going to have to continue to respond. I want to thank both you guys, Jeremiah Grossman from WhiteHat and Marc Kaplan from F5. Thank both of you gentlemen for coming in focus with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.